Welcome everyone to One Flesh Awakening's first webinar. I'm Dave Braun, Chief Operating Officer of One Flesh Awakening, and today Greg and Carrie Beavers, Chief Executive Officers of One Flesh Awakening, will be teaching. I'm in Irvine here in Southern California, a little bit cold here, and they're in Eulay, Florida, close to Jacksonville. So between us, Greg and Carrie and my wife Cheryl and I and Brian and Kim Simpkins, who's on our One Flesh Awakening team, we have almost 80 years of marriage experience. And our aim is to awaken your marriage to its full potential, taking it from ordinary to extraordinary. So one of the best ways to help you and ourselves is to teach the fundamentals and principles related to marriage topics. So we will be hosting webinars every month. Tonight, Greg and Carrie will discuss a huge topic, very, very important, communication. One of the fundamentals. So before we start, let's talk about a few logistics. So if you got your cell phone, turn it off or silence it so it doesn't get in the way, and get out a pad of paper and take some notes, because you're going to hear several important lessons that you'll want to remember. And on our site, there's a chat window. I think if you guys are on, you should see it if you're on live. And you can ask questions there. I know some of you have been chatting already, and me too. So I'll be monitoring it, and we'll take questions at the end. And the recording of this webinar will be available on our website within a couple of days. And since this is our very first webinar, there's going to be some glitches here and there, so be patient with us. And you can register for our next webinar on our site. It's going to be on January 8th. And you can see what all of our upcoming events are there, as well as read our blog post. Alrighty, so with all of that said, I'd like to switch things over to Greg and Carrie. Welcome, guys.
Hey, Dave. Thanks a lot for that introduction, and hey, everybody that's joined us, thanks for joining us. This is going to be fun. I got to tell you, I'm as nervous as a tick on a dog about to get a bath. I have never done this. And it's really exciting for Carrie and I would say that we're both really nervous. And so forgive us. We're here to help marriages improve. We're here to do what God has called us to do. So, Carrie, did you have anything to say?
Just glad that everybody has joined us this evening, taking time out of your schedule. And we pray that you hear something here tonight that will stir in your heart, and you'll be able to apply to your relationship to make it better.
So with that said, one of the crucial things that we want to do tonight is we want to talk about communication. In our experience, we have coached numerous couples. We've done premarital counseling with numerous couples. And one of the things that we find out that is really, really common among them all is that when they have troubles actually communicating with one another. And more I talk to people, there's folks out there that I've met on Twitter, through Facebook, through various other means, that when you ask them, they always say, man, if I could just talk to my spouse better, or understand what my spouse is saying to me, it would really improve what our marriage. So with that said, Carrie and I want to take just a few minutes to share some things about communication. Now, this isn't a be-all, end-all. It's just a real little tidbit. We've got other teachings, and as we do webinars, and we've got many things for One Flesh Awakening coming up. A lot of things in our future that's just really going to be amazing, and we're really excited about what God's going to do for us. Excuse me. We're going to go ahead and get started, and we do have a takeaway for you at the end. So get your pens, get your paper, write this stuff down. We have a really cool exercise that you and your mate can do over the next week to actually improve communication. And it's a really cool exercise. Carrie and I do it every once in a while. In fact, we've done it. We did it a couple of weeks ago and really enjoyed it. It really helped us out. So I'm going to go ahead and share the page with you. And Dave mentioned earlier about the chat box to the right of the screen. Please, if you have any questions, you want to communicate to us, Dave's watching that. At the end, we will address questions. We will try to answer your questions. If we can't, we will respond in an email to the whole group with the answer after we've thought about it, because I don't want us to shoot from the hip on this. I'm going to give you good, solid, coaching. So let's go ahead and have a look at our slideshow. All right. Dave, can you see that okay? You can just respond on the chat box. Okay. I'm going to assume that you can see this, and Carrie's watching the chat box, to make sure it's coming up. So what we want to talk about tonight is communication. And basically, what is my mate saying? And the very first part that we want to, here's a myth. People think that my mate knows my needs without me having to say anything. And Carrie, what do you think about that?
Well, it's definitely one of those things that many couples will fall into. I think typically it can definitely be the ladies who will tend to fall in this trap. They will want their husbands to be like that knight in shining armor who rides in on a horse and whisks them away to some castle in a faraway, mysterious land, and knows everything about her, and he'll be able to just anticipate any need that she may or may not have. But in reality, nothing can be further from the truth for your mate. Of course, the only one that can possibly know all of your needs and your wants is going to be your Heavenly Father. And so it's important not to get those relationships confused. But it's just not fair to expect your mate or to assume that your mate knows anything that you need without having to say anything.
And that's a great point. God knows us inside and out. When we meet our mates and we fall in love, we are dating, we get married. One of the greatest misconceptions that folks could have is that they immediately understand you. It's a bad myth. And we're going to give you some tools here to actually help you improve that. One of the very first things that you should do is be verbal. Express what you need. Tell your mate what you need. Don't just assume that your husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend know what you need. Tell them.
And it's important that you are able to verbalize. A lot of times we think body language or that certain look or a particular shrug maybe should get the point across, but again, you should never assume that you are communicating well unless you have actually verbalized the sentiments that you wish to express.
The next one is be honest. One of the worst things that you can do is walk through life side by someone and lie to them. Integrity, being honest, is really, really important in a relationship. If, Carrie and I have an examples. There are times I'm one of them sock throwers. I'll throw a sock around this and that. Carrie don't like that. Carrie don't like my socks to sit beside my chair. She don't like them to lay beside the hamper. She wants them in the hamper. And she's expressed that to me. That's one of the things that really help us as a couple to, 25 years going on 26. This is one of the things that I wish that before we were married, somebody would have said, hey, just honestly tell them how you feel or things that bother you, and you guys talk it through. Believe it or not, the more honest you are with one another, the easier it is to actually communicate with one another.
And that being said, of course, you want to make sure, just as in any other thing, that you want your honesty to be tempered with grace. We've all heard the phrase brutally honest. Your mate doesn't like that any better than anybody else in your life. It is important to keep your words honest, but you also have to remember that your mate has feelings, just as anybody else that you have in your life. And so you want to be cautious of how you say things. Say them in a loving manner, but it is important that you are honest about what you say.
The next one is be selfless. One of the things that we can do as people is we're selfish people. Folks tend to be about me, about me, about me. When you're in a relationship and you're becoming one with one another, and you're following Genesis 2:24, and you're following Ephesians 5:31, we're commanded to become one flesh. And to become one flesh, you have to learn how to be selfless. And to be selfless is simply putting someone's needs above yours. And there's really no other way to define that. Carrie, would you like to expound on that?
I think it is pretty well self-explanatory, but it goes along very well with the last slide of be honest. In what I said about not being brutal and making sure that your honesty is tempered with love and grace. And if you have a selfless attitude going in, then you are considering that other person ahead of yourself. And so when you're choosing those words to be honest with your mate, you're going to be mindful of how you're saying the things that you are conveying to them.
The next one is love unconditionally. One of the hardest things for people to learn as they're learning to love someone and they're learning to grow together is to do it without condition. And that's what unconditionally means. It just means without conditions, not to have any. It's not like saying, Carrie, me saying to Carrie, hey, Carrie, I'm going to love you more if you make a glass of tea for me. That would be a condition. You have to be able to love your mate without conditions. And that, as you've been together for years and years and years, you start really understanding that. It was about 15 or 16 years into our relationship when I really started understanding what love unconditionally meant.
That's very true. The love that we're trying to grow in our own marriage and that we are hoping that everyone else is shooting for as well is honestly not always pretty. I remember very well the first time that I got sick after Greg and I got married, and I was just devastated at the thought that he was going to have to see me at the toilet with my hair pulled back and all of the noises and the smells, and that was just, of course it's at your absolute worst. You don't want anybody to have to see you that way, but really it isn't until you get to those low moments like that that you recognize what unconditional love is all about, that you see beyond. We don't always look pretty, and unfortunately we don't always act pretty, but it's at those times when you reach down within yourself and you're able to help pick that other person up rather than shoot them when they're down. And so Greg has had the privilege of having a wife of many sizes, and I've been bigger, I've been smaller, and everything in between. And it is a privilege to sit alongside of him knowing that no matter what size I may have been, he still loved me just the same. And so those are the kind of things that we're talking about when we say love unconditional.
Very good point. And really, when you think about love and loving your mate, it's love beyond vision. It's love beyond. You need to love with every sense that you have in your body when you love your mate. And when you begin loving unconditionally, you look past some of those things. You look through the things that you normally wouldn't look through. So if you can apply this to your marriage, I promise you, it will make a difference. And then the next one is really forgive. One of the things that folks do is they tend to say, I forgive you, or somebody says, hey, I'm sorry, okay, you're forgiven or whatever, but they hold on to things. It's very important that when we're trying to understand our mate, we really need to understand if they've forgiven us or not. I've got a great example. Sunday, Carrie and I were meeting with a couple, and Carrie was talking, and I had, for some reason, we have, I was over talking Carrie. I got excited, and I just had to get my point across, which I never do, because anybody that knows me knows that I'm not a type A vocal person, and that would be a lie right there. I'm very vocal. I'm very type A, and I really want, I will share my opinion. Well, here's what I did. Carrie was talking, and I overtalked her. I mean, I literally talked louder than her, and I could tell on her face she was hurt by that. She was like, you know what? I don't like this. I don't like what you just did to me. So I honestly told Carrie when we walked out there, I said, hey, listen, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. I realized that I did it. And Carrie really forgave me. And I knew she forgave me simply because one of the things we tend to do is when we say we forgive, sometimes we hang on to it. And if you're hanging on to something in your relationship that you should have forgiven or you said that you forgave for, the other person is always trying to make up for that and trying to fix it. So just be careful not to say you forgive unless you really forgive. And if you don't have it in your heart to forgive, either set up all night, continue to talk, do whatever it is, find a way so you guys can forgive each other for indiscretions.
One of the ways to know if you've really forgiven is the fact that you don't bring it up anymore. It is an ammunition for a future conflict that you have. When you've really forgiven, you aren't constantly reminding the other person of, remember that time when you did this to me. If those are temptations for you, then there's a good possibility you may want to sit down with your mate at a time that's good for both of you to discuss it and actually try to get to the bottom of that one issue at a time. But you want to make sure that you're not doing that in the heat of another discussion, or if it is a time you don't want to blindside your mate with something just because it may be fresh in your mind. Set aside that time to talk. But true forgiveness is a necessary part of being able to move on and grow in your relationship.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so the next one, the next myth that we're going to talk about tonight, and we're only going to talk about two, so we will probably be ending here in about 10 to 15 minutes. We'll start answering your questions. So the next one is fighting is bad. Fighting is bad communication. And Carrie and I have heard this, numerous times. We've sit down with couples and coached them, just been out with couples and talked about them, or talked about, fighting and this and that. And oftentimes people consider fighting as bad communication. If we learn how to fight fair, fighting is very healthy for your relationship. And I'm going to let Carrie take this one because she's got a couple of things that she really likes to talk about on this.
Well, fighting fair is very important to being able to resolve conflict well. And one of the most important parts about fighting fair is to make sure that you are not bringing up any more than one topic at a time. And I alluded to that just a couple of slides ago. You want to make sure that you are able to discuss a particular issue with your mate. If you can't talk about something, one of the tendencies that we will have is to just shove that under the rug and we just make it a topic that we don't talk about anymore because we don't want to cause a fight. We don't want to have conflict. Well, what begins to happen is the stuff under the rug tends to overtake things. You aren't able to talk about anything because you push so many things under the rug. So you've got to deal with these issues and you've got to completely discuss them. But it's only fair to do that one issue at a time when you're discussing them.
Okay. So the next one is learn to keep it real, and this goes back to the honesty, and it goes back to being truthful. Make it about a real fight. Be honest with one another. Don't. I know some of you out there right now that are listening are little Columbos. Well, maybe you might not be old enough to know who Columbo was. Maybe you're a detective off of Law and Order, and you go out and you kind of think about all these things, and then when you come to the fight, you're bringing something to the fight that's just not real. You're bringing what you think is to the fight. Find out what it is, what really is the root cause to the fight, and just keep it real. Talk about that thing, not everything that you think it is, and just ask the question.
You also want to make sure that you avoid using always and never statements. it's a big temptation for some of us to say, you always do this, or you never do that. In reality, more than likely, that's not true. And remember, we talked about honesty several slides ago. You want to make sure that when you're talking with your mate about these things, that you're being honest and keeping it real, and using those always and never terms are probably not a good situation to put yourself in, simply because that's going to put your mate on the defensive when you get started. It's never a good place to be when someone feels like they must defend the behavior that they have had. So we just caution you against using always and never.
And I bet you guys are really enjoying my typing, aren't you? I know I am. I'm in here getting my little forefingers just to going. So yeah, those are great points. If you use the term always and never, what it's saying is, and an example here would be, hey, when we fight, you always, go on the defensive, or you always. That is an attack on character. That's an attack on not so much character. That's more of an attack on maybe a personality trait or something that's going that would be emotional for your mate. And saying, hey, you never allow me to do this, or you never, those terms they're aggressive words that actually point toward the person instead of pointing toward the issue that you're arguing about. So, moving on to the next one. All right, learn to both give and receive grace. Now, the other night when we were practicing, Dave said, hey, you know what? Maybe you should tell folks what grace is. So I'm going to hop down here to the next slide, and we're going to talk about grace for just a second. So grace is defined in 3 or 4 different ways. You can go on the internet and look your way, but this was the definition that best fit what we're talking about. It's grace is generosity of spirit. It's a capacity to tolerate, accommodate, or forgive people. So the kind of grace that we're talking here is not the kind of grace where, Christ sent his son down here and his son died, and through his sacrifice, grace was extended to every human being that walks the earth. The grace that we're talking about here is being generous in your spirit and having a capacity to tolerate, accommodate, or to forgive people. So coming back up here, learn to both give and receive grace. Well, it's kind of easy for us to receive grace. I think that's the easiest of the two. For me, I can think of times in my life where I needed grace extended to me because I had messed up. It was easy for me to receive grace when I truly knew it. Now, there have been times when I've been wronged. Some of you on this call may have some of that road rage anger. Or you might get upset with the cat or the dog or whatever it is, and you don't really like to give grace. It's hard to give grace when you're not someone that truly knows how to receive grace. Receiving grace is one of the things that you need to do humbly. Receiving grace is one of the things where you need to do with a thankful heart. It's not one of those things to where you would say, hey, I'm right, you're wrong, look at me, I told you so. Those are just bad ways of receiving grace. Receiving grace is saying thank you, being humble about it, and moving on, and not taking it as a way of you won or you're forgiven, so now you can go do it again. Giving grace, what's really important here that you have to understand about giving grace is sometimes you need to give grace even when you don't feel like it. You need to extend it because you need to throw that olive branch out there and say, hey, you know what? Husband, wife, I know I feel like I've been wrong here, but because I love you, I'm going to give you grace in this situation.
That's very well said. I don't even know that I can expound on that. It is more challenging, I think, for certain personality types to give and receive grace. I know myself, I tend to naturally be someone who's a rule follower, and I know that as a rule follower, I sometimes tend to see things very black and white, and there's not a lot of room for grace in that. If it's right, it's right. If it's wrong, it's wrong, and there is no gray area. And so because I had spent so many years living in that world, it was difficult for me to give grace, but I also, when I knew I was in the wrong, it was also difficult for me to receive grace, because in my own definition of what I deserved, I didn't deserve grace if I was wrong. And so it's been a learning process for me as well. And I do know that there is a lot of freedom that comes in your relationship when you're able to both give and receive grace.
Awesome, awesome. So we're going to start wrapping up with some closing notes here, and then Carrie and I are going to give you guys a takeaway, because we think it's just important to give you something kind of cool to work with. So one of the things that we wanted to tell you, to give your mate hope of unwavering love will require that you give grace for their weaknesses. I'm going to say that one more time. To give hope, to give your mate hope of unwavering love will require that you give grace for their weaknesses. That is such an awesome point. There are times that your mate, and I'm gonna be transparent here for you. For 28 years, I had an addiction to nicotine, and Carrie and I, we fought about it over the years. And after a point, she got tired of fighting with it. It was a weakness for me. My flesh was weak, and I allowed nicotine to rule over me and my body for a number of years. One of the things that Carrie did in her unwavering love for me was after she was fighting and she realized, hey, you know what? She just started extending me grace through my weakness. Well, when I quit last year, and thank the Lord, I'm around 536 days nicotine free now. I quit for 40 days before I even mentioned it to Carrie that I did, because one of the things that I had done was, I had not always been forthright with Carrie, and I had not always been the man that I needed to be to lead. And one of the things that made me proud was when I went and told Carrie after my 40 days I'd been quit. I said, hey, I'm quit. I'm 40 days. This is the 3 times further than I've ever made it before. And it was through that grace that she extended to me during my weakness that helped me grow.
And that's a very good point. And remember what I said a couple slides ago about not seeing a gray area anywhere. Everything's black and white. If it's right, it's right. If it's wrong, it's wrong. This was a huge wall that had been built between us for a lot of years, because what I was failing to see was my husband's struggle with this addiction that he had, that he really desired to quit, but it had quite a control over him, and I didn't understand that. Because really the only thing I had ever been addicted to was food, and I wasn't able to quit that because you kind of have to eat to live. So I really didn't understand his struggle, and what the enemy was able to do through that was to convince me that any time that it came back up again and reared its ugly head, because basically for us it was one of those non-issues. We didn't talk about it. So when we didn't talk about it, my assumption was he wasn't doing it. Then it would rear its ugly head again, and I would find something, or I would have evidence that it was happening. And so I saw that as a breach of trust, and I saw it as he was lying to me. And so the enemy used that ammunition to whisper in my ear constantly, well, if he's lying to you about this, then what else is he lying to you about? And so it drove a wedge between us that went much deeper than the actual addiction. Because it allowed us to have all of these other arguments and fights about things, and Greg's just trying to be real with me at times, but when he sees that he's not getting anywhere with that, then he just doesn't want to fight about it anymore. Well, it was an interesting thing that happened, and it's funny how God works this way, but during the same period of time that Greg was quitting, I actually had gotten to a resolve with the Holy Spirit on my own, and had come to the conclusion that I was never going to bring it up again. If I found any evidence, I was just going to move on. It wasn't going to be an issue for me anymore. I don't think I really still even understood the addiction part, but I had come to a resolve that I believed in my heart that that my husband wasn't lying to me about other things, and that every other area of his life, he was doing everything that he was supposed to be doing. It was just this one thing, and that was what was really cool, because when he came to me, I knew that I had already let it go. But getting to this place of unwavering love and giving grace in your spouse's weakness is a very, very key part of your relationship.
Very well put, Carrie. And then our last slide that we're going to actually talk about tonight is real relationships do not happen the way television and movies portray. You cannot fast forward or rewind to fix communication issues. Again, real relationships do not happen the way televisions and movies portray. You cannot fast forward or rewind to fix communication issues. That is a major, major point there. Guys, the person that you married and the person that married you are people that God created. And God created us all to live a life to where we should be striving for perfection. But you know what? I promise you there's nobody on this call, there's nobody that's going to listen to this in the future that can ever say, I'm perfect. If you're thinking that way, you probably need to do some more me time and a little less me time. And you need to focus on who you are and what God needs to do in your life, because it's not healthy for your relationship. So, Carrie, did you have anything to add to that before we give them the takeaway and answer some questions?
No, I think you covered that very well.
Okay, so bear with me as we switch back over, folks. Uh-oh. Can you see us now? All right, great. So Dave's nodding down there in the corner. Guys, technology is awesome. I really hope you guys enjoyed this. And Carrie and I have a really cool exercise that we do with folks that are that come to us for coaching, and they want to find a way to better communicate. And one of the things that we find when we're coaching couples and when we're talking to those couples that are struggling with communication is they don't know how to start the communication. They don't know how to actually start talking to one another. So there's an exercise that we like to give them, and I'm going to let Carrie tell you about that because she's been quiet for a little bit.
Well, the way that it works is you just simply go to your mate and you tell them that when they do something or say something, it makes me feel this way. That way, you're talking about how you feel, what your response is to something that they've said or done, and it is much less likely to put somebody else on the defensive, because your feelings are not something that somebody else can really argue or dispute. And it's just a good starting point, a good springboard, and like we said earlier, you want to make sure that you're not doing this with 12 different things in one evening. You don't want to bombard your mate. If you really want to work on the area of communication, then you're going to take these steps slowly, and you start with one thing, and I'll just give you a funny example. Since he brought up the socks earlier, I would say, if we were going to discuss the sock issue, I would say, honey, when you don't put your socks in the hamper, it makes me feel like you don't appreciate the fact that I want to do the laundry for you. And I would have
to put my socks away. Do you understand? That's the rule.
I would. And running around the house searching for your socks to get them clean makes me feel like you don't appreciate the job that I'm trying to do. And so that would be one of the, now that we have this big dog that loves socks, it becomes even more of a problem. And I can say that when your socks don't go in the hamper, it makes me feel frustrated when I have to chase your dog down to get your socks back.
And, now we need to give you some rules on this, because it's important that you have rules and boundaries, and write this down, because you've got to do this. Do not in any way make it all about negative stuff. And what I mean by that is I would pick a ratio of about 10 to 1. 10 great things against one thing that may not be so good. And I would focus on telling the things that were good before I did the math. And here's what I'm saying. For instance, Carrie shared the sock incident of '05. So in that situation, Carrie said, "Hey, when you do this, I don't feel loved." One of the things that we learned from that, and that we focus on, is we try to tell each other great things about one another. And if we do have something negative, we don't pile on. So, for instance, if you have something that you need to talk to your mate that's bothering you, or there's something going on that you really got to discuss, don't go in there and discuss 15 different things to get to that point. Just get to the point. Remember earlier we talked about being real with one another. We talked about being honest. Your mate is going to appreciate the honesty. Just think about it. When people are honest with you, how do you feel? You feel respected. You feel loved. So just make sure that you do a 10-to-1 ratio. Make sure that you are not badgering or using this as a tool to beat your mate up. So I think that's the takeaway. So here it is. I'm going to repeat it one more time.
You bring out a very valid point when you say that you should tell your mate good things as well. Because, oftentimes couples get out of that habit. When you're dating, you're always telling each other, how handsome you are, how beautiful you are, and how much you love everything that they do. And then once you get married and you're a few kids in and you've seen each other throw up over the toilet, then you kind of leave some of those things by the wayside. You've got to stop doing that. You need to get back to the basics, and truly, it would be a great practice for you to start this exact exercise with positive things. Start with the things that, when you take care of the kids in the afternoon and let me take a nap, it makes me feel so appreciated and so loved. That would be an example of something that you could say. Anything that your mate does that is special, the way they treat the kids, the way they do the laundry, the way they pack your lunch. It doesn't matter what it is. If you're telling them these positive things and building them up, it's going to be a whole lot easier for them to hear the not so positive things that you may have to share with them from time to time.
Yeah. So, folks, we hope you enjoyed it. We're going to take some questions, but listen, before we do, I want to encourage you. Facebook, Twitter. We're there. We've got a great website that Dave's working on with input from Brian and Kim Simpkins and Carrie and I and Cheryl, and we're actually building the team. We would love to hear you guys engage us on Facebook, engage us at Twitter, engage us on our website, because we're sitting here teed up, ready to play ball. We want to get involved in your lives. We want to help coach you through situations if they're there, and if we can't help you, maybe we can find folks that can, and we can encourage you through that. On here tonight we've got Song63 at Song63. It's a great Twitter account. My Beloved's Mine is their website. Go check those guys out. They have got a great couple story on there that can help you out. We're not here competing against anyone. We're competing against Satan, and we want to make marriages greater. We want to help you guys improve. And please get the word out on One Flesh Awakening. Talk to your friends. Share this stuff. Share our statuses. We're here to help. We've got some great things coming up. Dave, I hope you don't mind. Shake your hand no if you do. If one of the things that we've got podcasts coming up, Dave's getting a lineup of guys that our guys and gals and couples that we're going to interview. There's going to be success stories. There's going to be stories of redemption. There's going to be all kinds of things. We're going to talk to folks that's counseled with hundreds of couples. There's going to be a lot of cool podcasts out there to help us. This isn't to make One Flesh Awakening a multi-million-dollar business. If we save one couple, that's what we're after. What we're after is changing lives. We're after teaching people how to put God in the center. So please, whatever you do, share our statuses, help us grow. We're trying to build this brick by brick, and we'd love for you guys to engage and help us build it. So, Carrie, did you have anything else?
I don't. That was awesome. I love it when you talk like that. It makes me feel excited.
Hey, see there, guys? It works. So, Dave, do we have any questions?
Yeah, we had one, and we kind of answered it in the chat. But there's a couple of points I thought that I wanted to, while we wait for some of the questions that might come in, because there's a lag between what we're doing, Greg and Carrie, and what they're seeing on the feed. Just a few seconds. One of the things, Greg, is how many days did you say you were nicotine free?
I am somewhere around the 536 mark. I didn't mark it today, but it's 536, or it's either 536 or 539.
That's a great accomplishment. Congratulations for that.
Thank you, thank you. Only through God.
One of the points you mentioned about, and I think Carrie, you were talking about it. How do you know if you've really forgiven? Is that I think you said you don't bring it up to the person and use it as ammunition. And I thought that was a really good marker to know if you've really forgiven or not. I thought that was a great point.
Great.
Let's see. I know there was a comment about being able to receive grace. You have to be able to receive grace to be able to give it. And I think you guys also talked about it's not an emotion, really. It's a decision. You have to really decide that when the time is appropriate that you're going to give the grace.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
And I loved your last point about you can't fast forward or rewind to fix communication issues. I thought that was pretty good. So often we watch TV sitcoms, and we certainly sometimes think that that's the reality of life. Everything's wrapped up in the bubble in 30 minutes, a half an hour, or in the movies a couple of hours. It just isn't like that at all. So we just have to be realistic with our expectations there.
Awesome.
That was the comments that I had, and I don't think we have any other questions. So I think we should probably sign off. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to pray with everyone on the line before we do.
Absolutely.
And then sign off. So let's pray together, folks. Dear Lord, thank you for everyone that came and joined this webinar tonight, Lord. Thank you for allowing us to be able to do it. Lord, continue to fuel our fires. Continue to put those things in our path that you want us to accomplish, not what we want, Lord. Let us focus on you. Lord, I pray for any marriage right now that's listening to us, or those that will listen to us in the future. Fill those marriages, Lord. Let those folks turn to you. Let them understand exactly who you are, and understand that if they put you in the center, everything can be healed. Lord, as we leave here tonight, keep us all safe, keep us all healthy. Lord, let us all keep working toward greater marriages. In your name I pray. Amen.